when we talk about like Uber and Lyft, right? Where we're in the car with this stranger. And I feel like, Uber and Lyft have now, or rideshare has now been created in a way where we as the customer get the option to talk or not talk, or the driver has the option to talk or not talk. It's an interesting dynamic when you're in someone else's car, but you have been giving the autonomy to be like, well, I don't want to talk to you, or you don't have to talk to me. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think we're seeing society change.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I would use the word evolve, because usually evolve, we're becoming into something greater, right? I think of butterflies evolve, right? Or a caterpillar evolves into a butterfly. But I think that's a perfect example where I believe on these apps, I don't use them as much, but I believe you do have sometimes the option to say you want a quiet car, right? Which essentially will alert your driver that you don't want them to speak to you whatsoever. And so I know sometimes I'll get in the car and I'm always friendly and pleasant. I'm like, hello, how are you? And depending on their vibe or depending on my energy level and mood, right, I may want to engage further or I may not, or the driver may or may not as well. And so I think what's fascinating about how we're shifting in this economy is we have farmed out a lot of our community to these apps. So I know when I was doing my PhD in LA, right, Uber and Lyft weren't really a thing yet. And so when people needed rides to go to airports, who would you call? You would call your friends and see if they could take you to the airport, because that would be so much easier and way less expensive than a cab. And so clearly now, instead of calling up a friend, oh, I'm coming to visit you, it's like, okay, yeah, you'll just take an Uber here to visit me, right? So a part of community, a part of an interpersonal communication event, right? I remember picking up friends or driving them to the airport, right? What are we doing? We're talking for 30, 40 minutes while I'm driving you to the airport. We're having great dialogue, great FaceTime. So some of these communication events are disappearing because we are relying and using this technology. And so that becomes part of this breakdown where people desire community, but they're not necessarily willing or maybe even potentially able to offer that service, right? I know during the lockdowns, I ended up selling my car because I wasn't really using it much before the pandemic began. And now, since we're no longer on lockdown, though very much in a pandemic. I believe it's over 1 million people a day are still getting COVID just in the United States alone. We're in the 11th wave. News isn't really talking about it, but it is here. And if you just do a little research, right, just look under the cap, right, you can see a lot that's happening. But even though we're not in lockdown, right, fortunately, I live in a city, so I can take mass transit. I do have access to a community of people who have cars if I need to go somewhere, or I'm fortunate enough where I can afford an Uber or a Lyft if I need to go to the airport. But clearly I don't have a car, so I'm not someone who would offer now that community service. But also, if we think about it, who really drives their friends to the airport anymore, right? Or loved ones to the airport anymore? I know I drive my parents to the airport, right? They'll pick me up in their car and they'll drive there, right? And then I'll take their car back to their place to run errands. But that's really just my parents, right? My friends that live around me, none of them have asked me if I could help them with a ride. And whenever I go to the airport, I don't ask them either, right? So these aspects that maybe even a decade ago that were part of our fostering of communities and creating, and more so not just creating, but maintaining these bonds, these aspects are kind of disappearing.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's definitely not as a people, we're not as consistently connected or wanting to be connected, I feel, as I feel like at one point in time, society would push us to be connected. And then when we talk about those things and wanting to connect with people, it kind of brings me to talking about kind of key elements of building those personal relationships or those key elements to communication. What are some that you mentioned for you that you would mention for yourself that you think are key elements of building those relationships?
Sure. So in my book, I talk about like a friendship formula, which has 4 ingredients, but I think these ingredients are vital to any interpersonal relationship. So of course, first and foremost, and we've been talking about it, but haven't labeled it, is investment. So investment is the time, the feelings, the energies, the thoughts that you put into a relationship. So clearly driving a friend to the airport is an investment. You're using your time to take this person. And oh, by the way, once you drop them off, you have to get yourself back home. So it's just not the ride to the airport. It's also now you have to ride maybe in solace. I'm someone, if I'm driving, right, I either call somebody or I'm listening to music, right? So I'm not feeling alone. But, you know, that's a vital, important aspect of any interpersonal relationship is investment. And I think the reason we see a lot of turnover and a lot of relationships is people aren't investing to the degree. And so I know for myself, I'm very much a planner. I'm someone that kind of leads my friend group here where I created a mass text and I'll say, hey, this event's happening. I'm interested in going. Anybody want to go? Or I'm doing this if you want to come. So I'm a planner, and that doesn't take much investment. But what does take investment is when I host cookouts or kickbacks or movie nights, right? So I have to have my place prepped. I have to have some food, some drink. And so this is me investing. And so if you have relationships where you feel like the investment is unequally yoked, where I'm always putting in and this other person is just taking out of the bank, that's when usually we see issues with interpersonal relationships, right? And so I've experienced that with familial relationships, where one thing I give to, I think, the younger generation is, and I appreciate teaching, I call them learning communities, is the fact that when we talk about interpersonal communication, we talk about our shall not rules when it comes to friendships and dating, well, those same things should also apply to familial relationships. And I think older generations, and, was pushed on me, but thank goodness to my students for kind of popping me out of that, where we just suffer, oh, I wouldn't allow a friend to do that, but, oh, that's my cousin. That's my aunt, that's my uncle, oh, that's my brother, that's my mom, that's my dad. So, even though I don't appreciate that, or I wouldn't let someone else do it, they get a free pass. Well, no, they shouldn't get a free pass either. So I think that's one part of the formula, right? I call it friendship formula, but I think interpersonal communication formula or interpersonal relationship formula is you have to have investment. And then from that investment, we build emotional closeness, which is through that dialogue or through shared activities. So we know from different research studies that usually women who are forming interpersonal relationships, especially with each other, they do it more so through dialogue. So that self-disclosure, opening up, where usually cis hetero straight men oftentimes do it through shared activities. So they'll join a rec league, or they'll join a gym, or they'll join something, and through that activity they'll foster those friendships. But what's dangerous sometimes, where if you're just building that emotional closeness through shared activities, is when those activities go away, what happens?
I need you to go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Yes, click that subscribe button up there on this YouTube channel and turn on your notifications so you know when the new stuff is coming out. And if you subscribe, you can catch up on all the episodes you done missed, child, because it's a lot here. And you need to stay here because we need you.